and start recording. And brilliant. Welcome to January's Toronto Product Management Association meeting. We are talking about breaking into product, landing the first crucial role. Very excited for our panelists that have joined us this evening. Thank you all. So Ben McPhee from Thriver, Jane Helman is with us from Points, and Mihnea Galeteanu is from Coconut Software, and going to be telling us all about landing that first role from the hiring manager's perspective. We're going to talk about it from the prospect's perspective, from the individual trying to break in, and very excited about this evening's conversation. So we'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the land we're meeting on as the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Also acknowledge that folks joining us online are in all different lands. This is very relevant to where we're sitting here in person in downtown Toronto this evening. Special thanks to our sponsors coming far and wide through the product community, from the roadmap side, product analytics side, membership side, and so forth. Thank you all for helping sponsor. And we are in this beautiful new space that Versit has, and I'd like to invite Chris up to say a few words about Versit.
So thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm really pleased to have you here. When we first learned that the Toronto product management community was looking for a place to meet up, it just felt like a really perfect sync up with the space that we're really just moved into about a month ago, but just in terms of what we do as a company. So for those of you who are not familiar with Versit, we're about a 100-person product design and development company across Canada. We have a global footprint with operations in Colombia and across about 5 different countries across Europe, totally about 3,000 people globally. So our sweet spot is we help people like you build and develop new product propositions, take them from ideas all the way into the market and all the things in between. So that's what gets us busy around here. And so looking forward to hosting many more of these with you all. And certainly, as we're ramping up our teams over the coming months, there will be postings on our website for open roles that some of you might be interested in. So welcome to Versit.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having us. Brilliant. So for tonight's event, we are going to get into the topic. There's a Slido for Q&A. There's a QR code here, and it'll also be available in the TPMA Slack. So you can add your questions in as we get a little bit deeper into the conversation. We'll flip over to Slido and answer questions that are pressing to everybody's minds. So please go in, add your questions, and upvote the others that are most pertinent to what you're interested in. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's begin a little bit about what was your background prior to getting into product management? Whoever would like to begin.
I can start. I have the weird background of having gone right out of university into product management and never been anywhere else. So I don't think you hear that story too often, but I was in business school. I went to Queens. Any Queens folks? Yes. Nice. Nice. So I was in Queens Commerce, and I thought that I was going to be majoring in marketing and getting into a marketing job because there were only a couple of paths at the time, either marketing or finance effectively. And so got a job as a product manager because I assumed that a product manager in a software company was the same as a product manager at Kraft, and it was not at all. And so I went into a job at a software company with no technical background, no understanding of what product management was. And I learned everything from a very gracious intelligent boss who mentored me for a couple of years straight and took it from there.
Nice. For myself, I was not as straight as you. I took a very roundabout way to get into it. So I went to U of T for computer engineering, and then started my career on the tech side, realized I was okay at it, but not great at it. And I would never excel at it because there are just people way better and more talented at the tech side of things than I was. But I like to ask questions, and I love the process of how we got to, something that we came up with an idea to all the way to actually delivering it. So I got into the process side and kind of went the agile scrum route, and then I landed at Points where I'm still at, and lots of great people there who were very supportive and like, come over here, check this stuff out, ask the right questions. And I landed in product, with a lot of support from folks. So definitely not the direct.
So it depends on how far back we want to go, but I'll start with something more decent. So after university, I went to school for software engineering at Carleton. I'm not sure if there's any Carleton folks out there. No. So I did software engineering at Carleton. I got a minor in business at that point, and one of the things that kind of took me down that path was I realized in one of my co-op terms that I didn't just want to build technology for technology's sake. I was more interested in figuring out, okay, how do we solve real people problems with it? I attribute my career a lot to luck. I think we'd be all foolish if we didn't acknowledge the role of luck. So my first co-op term ever, I had my desk, and across the hall from me was the CEO, and I always heard all these like very interesting conversations about where the business was going and whatnot. And I'm like, I want to do more of that, and or figure out how I can apply this to that. So anyways, finished, got my software engineering degree, ended up getting an MBA, and I have to say that because I got an MBA, so every MBA has to say that. It's part of the contract. Then through that, I got a role in product marketing because I used to love writing about how to use the software that I was actually building during the day. At night, I would write about how you can apply that software. I used to work for IBM at that point. Somebody said, okay, well, why don't you come and do product marketing for a living? So I did that for a bit. And then I realized that I felt like I was doing a lot of PowerPoint programming. Google Slides were not a thing at that point, but I wasn't actually doing anything meaningful with technology. So I decided to calibrate and landed in product management about 10 years ago, maybe more at this point. And I've been here ever since.
Microsoft just made a big investment in OpenAI for ChatGPT. It's all the rage. Can't walk 2 feet down Richmond Street without somebody talking about ChatGPT, so we might as well. So a lot of speculation. It's going into Bing. Imagine 3 or 6 months from now, you put in your natural language search, what is product management into ChatGPT's new skin Bing. What is it going to tell us product management is?
Okay, so are we gonna do it? Because I tried to guess what it might say. I didn't actually check.
You know that they're like rate limiting because they're spending $3 million a day on search. I mean, we can try, but it might not work.
I had a guess, and so what I did in the spirit of ChatGPT, I tried to answer that was about 60 to 80% correct. So it's not actually supposed to be right, but pretty close. So a multifaceted discipline in technology companies that employs devices of design, market strategy, user research, and project management in order to achieve data-driven objectives of customer satisfaction and growth.
I like it.
Pretty good.
Is it missing anything?
I like the word design. I feel like it's missing the human element of it. The reason I am in product management is because I want to solve human problems. And I think that's why I'm not really that scared about ChatGPT for a while in terms of job security, because I feel like humans are very complex beings, and it takes a lot to understand what makes each and every one of us tick. So I think solving human problems, that's what attracts me to the job, and that's why I'm still in.
It's understanding the human behavior side of it as well, because we all react differently in how we solve that problem, how we interact with it. Any product that we see is very different. I know my husband and I do things completely oppositely of everything. So you can't develop something without understanding person, understanding why they're there, what is the problem, but also who they are, like what direction are they coming from, what path are they trying to get there. And I don't think the bot can figure that out yet.
I totally agree. I think to sort of worry about whether or not they're coming for the job. I think it's way too dynamic, exactly what they just said. Like there's the unpredictable nature of the kinds of decisions you're going to have to make, from design decisions to informal leadership decisions to prioritizing with almost no data, if any at all in some cases, to switching hats between one day you're an architect, the next day you're in BD effectively, or you're in sales. So I think, there's little parts of it that can be figured out, maybe independently, but holistically and over time. I don't see how to automate that nuance. And I think a proof point of that is the fact that we even have to have this session. Like it's that complicated to actually understand how to get, like, the stories you just heard, like how we got here. Like I think just goes to show that, I don't know if you can put an input and spit out a product manager yet, but I don't think it's coming soon.
Yeah, the point of needing to make bets, like jumping off at some point and using the best that you've got plus your intuition, and I got these bets and I would take that with this certitude. And the machine might be able to make some good steps there, but I understand it's quite hesitant to opine at the moment, and to say one thing is really better than another. So coming in then from the getting your first job as a product manager perspective, what do you think is most consistently the successful pipeline for becoming a product manager? Internal, external, like where do you think successful product managers most commonly come from?
Oh, I think for me, like, I don't know that there's one place that they all come from. Like, I can't just go from to the farmer's market and pick them up. I think they come from all walks of life and all sides of, for us at points, we've seen a lot of success in all different departments. And even when we're externally, they're literally in every single department. So I myself didn't take a straight path. I feel like nobody that I've come across except for you has taken a straight path. Has taken a straight path. And so it is keeping an open mind. There's no one place, but it's a skill set, it's a personality, it's that willingness to ask the questions and want to be in the product role for the right reasons. I think that you're just, as long as you ask those questions, you're going to find a lot of people can answer that without, fitting a descriptor.
Yeah, I have the same. It's a fuzzy source. To try and unfuzz it a bit. I guess where I've seen a lot of success is people with backgrounds that relate to analysis. So I'll say, people who have, but I've seen it come from business. I've seen it come from QA, marketing managers, but they were in a role or in a profession where they spent a lot of time analyzing, deconstructing, reconstructing, and then communicating problem solution sets. Not necessarily the technical ones, could be philosophical, could be process related. But I found that a common thread tends to be someone who is well-versed and comfortable with end-to-end analysis, and they can convert that into all kinds of other avenues.
Probably the only thing I would add to all of that, I think what Jane said around curiosity and just being hungry to be like, why does this work the way it does, and how can I make it better for me and my customers? I think it's kind of key, and we'll get into that a bit later. But when I interview folks, that's probably the main thing I look for, is like, are you curious enough and are you greedy enough to go through the what's often a shitty day to day until you get to the solution, right? So so I would say curiosity is, and in terms of what I think all of people that I've come across that have been successful in product management, they've also been very comfortable with the unknown and just the analysis is great, and I think some of that you can probably teach, but just being uncomfortable with not knowing why something works and trying to figure it out and go into the motions, I think goes a long way. So just being comfortable to live in a constant state of panic really is probably goes a long way.
Yeah, it's been a long while in product management that I woke up and had the day that I thought I was going to or planned to have by generally about 9:02, 9:03, give or take. So I think you could easily surmise from anyone in the profession that not all product roles are the same. So how does an aspiring product manager vet? What is it that they're getting into? What should they be asking as they're trying to learn more about the organization and the role that they're trying to get?
For me, I think probably the most important thing, especially for folks who have never done this, I think the best way to get into the profession is to try to find an organization that's trying to solve a problem that you're extremely passionate about. You can teach that. You cannot outsource that. You cannot, like, whatever you feel here about a problem space, nobody can take that away from you. So that's an attribute that only you will have. And I think that would probably be what I would try to do is find a company that's that's trying to solve a problem that you're extremely passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to be able to understand the problem. And if you find it challenging, either you have to find someone who's going to help you explain it. But you have to want to understand it. I think if if you're not technically savvy and you have no interest in getting that, deep into the technical aspects, probably don't want a technical PM role. You want to stay towards something you do understand. So maybe it's the front end side where you understand it, you interact with things. And you're like, this is a problem I can solve. It just, you take part of the skill set and change the ratio of how much you have to influence it. Because you're going to learn stuff on the job. You'll learn enough to figure it out. And there's always colleagues who are more than willing to assist you to kind of understand that. But I think you just have to want to know the problem space and kind of gear towards your strengths a bit.
Yeah, so I am always shocked when I speak to product managers and people at companies with product management, the difference in the roles of product across all these companies and what they expect out of their product managers. So the first thing I would say, investigating, or just straight up ask, give me the day in the life of the product manager. What do they do at your company? Because I've heard everything from requirements writing to collaborating with design and developers to update meetings to negotiating with senior leadership stakeholders. Like, it's all over the place. So just get an idea of what they're doing from, I was gonna say 9 to 5, 8 to 7. So get that idea. I would say in terms of a marker of a company, like, I think there's sort of two parts that I've noticed, I think are fairly straightforward, but what stage is the company at? Like, are we talking seed? Are we talking startup, ramp up? Are they an incumbent that's sort of very incrementally growing? And then combined with that, what's the scope of the ownership of the product when it comes to features? Do you own the platform, or do you own a little feature inside of a module, inside of a suite, inside of a platform at a company that has 2 releases a year? So then you combine those two things and you get a pretty good sense of whether you'll be doing really quick iteration, quick releases, lots of innovation, lots of pumping things out versus lots of metrics and lots of analysis and lots of long loop feedbacks and things like that. So depending on what you find attractive about the role, I think those two things will be a good indicator of the pace of work and the kind of stuff you'll be producing.
See the messages, first of all.
Preparing for that first role, from either an academic or a career progression, what are the best steps that an aspiring product manager can take so that they can make themselves stand out and be that front-running candidate for a new first-time product manager position?
I don't have a good answer for this one. So there's classes and things. You guys have actually mentioned APM, things like that. So there's a couple that I've heard very good things from and seen great outputs from. Is Product HQ is one, if you're not in that world. And then Scrum Alliance, like actually being a certified product owner. So doing stuff on the side that isn't necessarily what your core profession is. In terms of actually being in the profession, in a company, all I would say is it's really hard. And we'll talk about, I guess, the qualities and characteristics of a product manager, but just do something and treat your role or get a role where you can be a product expert. Just somewhere you can immerse yourself in the product and know it like the back of your hand. Yeah, maybe if that's not your role, but things like, whether it's CS or solutions engineering, whatever, but somewhere where you can know a product inside and out. And then at least you're going to give that comfort to somebody if you don't have, let's say, the classic skill set, you at least know all the answers about how the product works today, and then you can build on top of that.
Yeah, I think especially if you're trying to like get in to that role, don't try to, know the product that they're building really well, because they're, the folks in the company have immersed themselves a ton. I'd rather you pick something that you love, right? And be able to pick it apart a little bit and do the dissecting and, the analysis. It's like, if this were the product, and you were the product manager for that particular product, what would you do differently? What would you challenge? What could you think of? Because one, it shows the passion that you have for this, thing or problem that you love and how you might go about solving it. That to me shows how much you're going to invest in it, because then once I ramp you up on whatever we're building, and as long as you have that passion, you're going to have that curiosity. You're going to want to challenge it and innovate on it and keep digging and not being satisfied until, continuously keep growing.
Yes to all of that. The one thing that I'd say, and I don't know about most product organizations out there, but I know the product organizations that I was fortunate enough to work for, we've always been open to folks from other departments coming in and being like, hey, I've noticed this problem, or like, I'd love to do a little bit of more of a deep dive into this particular issue or this feature or whatever. And because of what we're just talking about, the 8 to 7 and the shitty days and all of that stuff, no sane, I would say, product team would turn away any kind of help that somebody would give them in terms of going deeper into a particular problem area. I've done it at Coconut, I've done it at Points. I've just go and ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. Just go to the product team and try to see if they would let you do a business case on something, or put together some kind of an analysis of a problem that you believe strongly that the product of the organization that you work for could benefit from. So start within the company that you work for now, and then use that as a catalyst to then go and find a product role somewhere else if that opportunity doesn't open itself up in the organization that you work for.
I was reading an article the other day about, how to explore product management, and getting coffee time with product leaders, with product managers, and asking questions is such a great way to just start to figure out what does product management mean at our organization. Hopefully it's not overly jargon laden and everything else, high likelihood that it is. But when you go to talk about product management, talking about it in relatable terms and not in the textbook terms, I think can also make a big difference for increasing your chances. So flipping it from the perspectives point of view to the hiring managers, or the prospects rather. And we heard analysis, we heard curiosity. What are the most essential skills a hiring manager is evaluating for that first-time product manager?
Yeah, for me, it is, how willing they are to try to solve a problem, like what is their motivations, like, because you have to know, like, why are you trying to get into product, right? Like, that's got to be the first question, because if it's for the wrong reasons, like it's money, it's not going to do well. But if you're actually trying to solve a problem, you're trying to make something better for somebody, you're already more interested, you're going to want to put more of your effort and your, I would say, your time into trying to figure out those answers. But yeah, to me, it's about the potential, because a lot of things are teachable, but I can't teach a person to want to care about looking at people and what are their, how they do things differently to try and solve for that.
Okay, I thought I'd spin the answer to just articulate what I use to evaluate product managers for their performance. So I have a 8-dimension criteria, and I look for this when I hire people and when I sort of evaluate their performance in the company. So I'm just going to go through the dimensions. Some of them are pretty basic. Organization. If you're not the most organized person in the company, I'm not sure product is the place for you. I don't know how everybody feels about their own organizational skills, but I think you got to be the most organized person in the organization. Attention to detail, problem solving abilities, autonomy. So being able to be the person who pushes things forward without being told exactly what to do and when to do it, that uncertainty factor. Forward thinking, so the ability to not just think about the problem at hand, but how that impacts other people, other departments, other users, future plans for the business, scalability, technically, if that's it. Communication, everywhere from writing a good email to communicating on Slack to presenting to a team to help training departments. Collaboration, leadership. Yeah, so leadership is the last one. So I think there's a saying that I'll paraphrase, like the product manager is one of the only roles that doesn't have any direct reports, but has all the direct reports, effectively have influence on all kinds of people. And if you don't have those leadership skills, it's going to be a tough go to motivate people. So those are sort of the 8 dimensions. And I'll say a 9th is goal setting and tracking. You'd be surprised how hard it is for people to synthesize and come to a very specific goal and get people to rally around that goal and then track whether or not they're headed towards it. So those are kind of like dimensions I would look for in terms of skills.
I stole an interview question from Google that I really liked, and I used it a lot. And that was during the interview, I would just ask people to teach me something new that I wouldn't know. And I think that touches on a number of those aspects, but probably the most important one is the communication aspect. I struggle with it. I was just talking to our L&D manager at Coconut. We're at that point where we can actually have an L&D manager, learning and development. And she was asking me, what are the things that you need help with? And I said communication, especially communication to the leadership team, to the executive team. It's something that as a product manager at any level in the organization, you have to be able to do that. And I have to be able to send you in front of the CEO and tell them, and you have to explain to them why is it that you want to build this over that. And if you can't do that, then it's very unlikely that you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I actually, if I had to pick the one thing you had to be the best at, I'd for sure say communication. And so I love the interview question. And so I stole one from an old boss of mine that I think is the best interview question. And I've actually given it, ignored it, and regretted it because the person didn't answer it very well. And I'm like, but they've got other stuff. I'm like, I should have stuck with the shitty answer. And that answer is pretend I'm 6 years old, which, by the way, will already put some people on their heels because they'll start talking to you like you're 27. They're like, I'm 6. They're like, oh, right, you're 6. So you're just catching that and explain a database to me. Pretend I'm 6, explain to me a database. It doesn't even have to do with how much they technically understand a database, but if you can take that idea, put the empathy in place, put that perspective in place, and really explain it so that you understand it, I think that touches on a lot of elements of what you need to be doing in that job. And I totally agree. It's critical to the role.
Plus, you walk away knowing something brand new.
Exactly. And then
somebody taught me how to make pottery, I think, in an interview. Now I have a pottery wheel.
Yeah, exactly. Another reason to lose track of your day. Now you're looking for your hobby slot, right? building diverse teams. How do you build a diverse set of early stage product managers? How does that come into play from the hiring manager's perspective?
Building diverse teams. You have all the notes.
Well, one way you can look at it is trying to balance out those skills. So you're not going to, in early stages, you're not going to get somebody who's got 8, 10, 12, whatever dimensions are required for the job. So I do actually try to find people that will balance the other ones out. So some people on the team are particularly strong with communication. Others are particularly strong with problem solving. Others are strong with sort of organizational dynamics, whatever that might be, and collaboration. So I think finding that rubric and actually explicitly finding where people map on it is really, really helpful. But I think it's really hard. I think what I've just found is it's individual attention. Like hiring is one thing you can try in the door to get those things that are going to give you a diverse team. But once the team's in there, I think it's cultivating each individual. I've never had a situation where I could just, hey team, here's the mandate, go figure it out as product managers. Like every single product manager has a different way of thinking, different way of approaching it. And so I think you can help to the individual grow so that you are kind of crafting through their own personalities, their own characteristics, diversity. So I would just say personal attention is how I think you can achieve that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, I'm gonna steal your framework. It is all those, right? Like you can't, it'll be very challenging to find a unicorn that has all of the elements, especially out the gate, especially when you want, I'd say, a good mix of like new folks and more tenured folks on your team, because you have very different perspectives. If you have all tenured folks, you almost end up with potentially just being blinded by some of the things you got your biases from previous instances or previous projects. And so you have those fresh eyes as well. They have very different perspectives. And I think it is the different backgrounds that they bring. So, I love that people come from different areas of business or different walks of life and different parts of problems, and how they approach the problems are very different. And I think you have to kind of find, candidates who help you in all those, the 8 different pillars, and help each other, because product is also about growing each other. So if you've got a strong communicator, they'll help the other folks who aren't so strong at it. If you have a good organizer, they'll help the other folks. And so you do want to find that balance from all walks of life. And I think you end up with everybody levels up together. Everybody starts becoming that unicorn you desperately want to keep.
I would add to that a different dimension. I would say in that the product teams look a lot like me, and that is not a good thing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people that have come from privileged backgrounds, such as myself, are probably more likely to put their hand up and say, I want to do that thing. I want to try the product role, even though I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And it's unlikely that, the studies show that, women, for example, unless they check all the 15 billion things that are on the job descriptions, they're not going to apply for the role. And product, because it's all of those things, it's very nebulous. It's very like, there is no school for it. There is some, organizations that are trying to formulate education a little bit around it, but there's really no set background. It attracts a certain type of personality, and that makes the industry a little bit not as diverse as we'd like it to be. So as a product leader, I think it's important for all of us to be putting our hand up, and not our hand up, putting our head up, and just trying to pick people from parts of the organization that would not necessarily apply for the roles, but you believe they show those inert things like curiosity, or they've done something that would suit them for the role. try to poach them to come into the product team. I think it's not as easy as just in other positions that where the requirements are pretty set. It's easy for people to apply for the roles because product is so diverse in that like it lacks their formality. It's hard for people to put their hand up and apply for roles unless they meet all the criteria. So I would say it's important that those of us who are in leadership positions, we actually look out and try to seek those, to seek that talent, because it's out there. We just have to not just look for those who apply for the role.
Yeah, I like that. I like that the role can have so many different criteria, and like this is an ideal profile that has these experiences and can manage these responsibilities, but you also want somebody that's striving upward, and so you might take 60 or 80% of that plus some other mix that they're bringing to the table. My former employer used a communications assessment tool called DISC by Wiley. And I did this with my team and found that I had some of the D dominant, I think inquisitive, S sensitive or sociable, and then C, I forget, collaborative or something or another, with kind of like what their dominant communication style, and seeing the team members all over the map and not having tried to design for it was like this nice aha, like, oh, we're kind of coming at this from all angles of the table, and can definitely relate to, if you're doing very heavy front end or data platform or other pieces, like you don't want a cookie cutter product manager across all different aspects of it. So this is just like a word to those that are seeking that product management role, like figure out what you're really good at, figure out what this company is looking for, and try to lock those things up into a really good fit for a great professional experience. So whether it's a communication inventory or some other assessment or like a test or like a case study or something, is there any kind of assessment or instruments that you all use during your recruitment?
Nothing formal. It's asking questions that sort of allow them to speak how they think and how they go about evaluating problems, how they think about other people, how they think about roles. And I like letting people talk it out. Like I always start off an interview with, walk me through your journey up till now. Just where do they take it and how they take it and how they explain things they've encountered, and where they put their attention. Because again, it's all about characteristics of that person. So no, in that sense, nothing formal. It's just purely understanding the nature of that person.
Time is up.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's no framework on our side either, and I think it almost defeats the purpose, like you were saying, like product is so kind of open and like there's so many differences and nuances. Like I was just talking to a former colleague and friend, like no 2 days are exactly the same. So I think if you have a framework, it almost defeats the purpose. You might not be okay with this because no 2 days, no 2 frameworks that you answer are really going to be the same. So it is kind of leaving it open, having those questions and making sure I kind of feed off of, whatever it is that they're building on, and kind of give them that opportunity to keep, expanding on it, extrapolating on it, articulating it, because that's the meat of it. That's where you're going to see the communication. You see, if they've got the curiosity around it. It's just asking them, additional questions.
I also don't use a framework. Some of the frameworks that I've seen used on me in the past, though, are things like, hey, let's build an app where somebody can order a pizza or whatever it might be, and the concept of like building the minimum viable product and like prioritizing features and what's the most important thing. And but all of that I think goes back to You know, 'cause you ask why 5 times, and the why of any of that is really trying to get behind what you're both saying, which is how does somebody think about a problem? Like, where do they start? How do they take it? You know, even the career conversation. You know, like, why did you switch from product marketing to product management, or why did you make these moves along the way? You know, it's understanding how somebody thinks, because ultimately that's the only skill that you bring to the product management role, is making those decisions, being able to be comfortable making the wrong decisions. You know, like, tell me some situation where you failed. What did you learn from it? You know, things like that. I've used the one time I think I used the framework was not on a product manager, was on a product designer, because I like to experiment with things like this. But the question was, how do you make toast? And I asked them to draw. We went for coffee, and I brought a piece of paper, and I said, draw how you make toast. And that was a 2-hour interview right there, just that question. Because, you know, like, why did you pick this? Why did you draw this step and other step? And, you know, like, what do you put on the toast? All of that.
Well, add on to what you said as well. I think if you're able to get some insight and interview in such a way, or research the company in such a way that you can map your skills and passion to what you think that company's up to, it's massive, because getting to their passions and what they want to accomplish sometimes doesn't align with where your company is at. Like, you could have a really bright person, but, you know, if what they're really excited about with products, for instance, I don't know, is speaking to users and finding out what users want and talking to the market and doing market research. There are companies where that is what product managers do a lot. And then there are small startups where that's not what they need, because they need someone who's just behind and knock things out day after day. So that alignment with where that company is and what they might need is also critical to sort of tease out of that person's passion, because you don't want to waste their time giving them a role and product that they're not going to enjoy, because that's not what they thought it would be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm laughing about this chat GPT everywhere. It's like unavoidable. Everyone's like, but it's going to do it, right? It's like, but you need chat GPT where you are, and where you are, right? Like, no.
The engineers just recently tried it on a couple of teams. They think it's hilarious and fun. I don't really care. But they're like, oh, they've got a problem. And so they're like, let's ask ChatGPT. And it gives them like full blocks of code, which is great. And so they run it and like errors all over the place because libraries are missing. I was like, so it comforts me by letting them have that experiment that I'm not so fussed. Things are still going to require that human touch to it, and people who are experts and people who are going to ask questions and challenge it, because defaults to some interesting library choices as well. I was like, all right, thank you. That's what it is.
Angular.
So from the prospect's perspective, if you were to recommend one product management framework to study, to read up on, to learn, leaving this conversation, what would you say is a good one for them to get really familiar with and to start building that product manager's toolkit?
I'll let somebody else go first.
You know, my Bible for a very long time has been, and I'm sorry, I use the word Bible. It's my kind of like go-to has been the Lean Startup. I think you can go wrong with that. That is just it's a very insightful book and framework, and how to approach problems. And all of us, especially if you're going to end up in a startup, being the ability to be lean and be ruthless in terms of prioritizing is what's going to get you very far. So I would say the Lean Startup is probably the framework.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree. I enjoyed that book as well. I think for me, I'd recommend listening. Like, I listen to a lot of Tim Ferriss. He's really, really good at asking questions and how he draws people to like answer questions. And so I think listening to anything like that, podcasts, a TED Talk and stuff, where you're actually trying to learn more about something that you haven't learned. How are they asking the questions to learn about something? Because I think we're not that great at asking questions in general. So just learning how to ask questions, I think will help you in from a product standpoint, be able to kind of tease out the things and, there's start with why, because you have to ask 5 levels of why. And I think if you can ask that, and sometimes it's not just why, but how you're asking that why question will help you. But I think those are all my curiosity related ones I fall back on.
Oh, very good answer for this. Because it's gonna sound like such an asshole thing, but I've sort of made my own frameworks along the way, just because I think that's a very producty thing to do. Like I sort of looked at other ones and been like, I'd like to actually craft something that I think makes a little more sense. So I'm not gonna bloviate on what those are, but I would say I still think the understanding and being very in tune with the fundamentals of sort of the history of how product and software development life cycles have got to today, talking about literally just like waterfall methodologies and agile principles, just understand all of that. Like I just think understanding all the fundamentals and principles of those frameworks and those methodologies, I would say is a great place to understand how everything moves in terms of execution, because I think that's an important place to be, aside from just trying to take a different tack, aside from what you guys have mentioned. So understanding sort of the fundamentals of how things move forward in the organization, I think is a great place to gain some knowledge.
What I one thing to that is not really a framework, it's just something that I benefited from, so I'll share it. I took a course once, it was called Storytelling for Influence by IDEO, which is a great organization in terms of like design thinking and courses and whatnot. And I think I keep referring back and I keep sending everybody that struggles with communication, go and take that course, because you're going to learn a lot about how do you communicate and how do you synthesize your thoughts in a very succinct way, because nobody needs to know about how SQL works. What you need to talk about is like, what is the outcome that you're after, and that's all storytelling at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest distinctions I would draw between entry-level product managers and product leaders is product leaders creating that narrative, creating the story of where the product is and where the product is going to go. And everyone's like, okay, well, what's the bit in the vision, that strategy, that story is a huge part of conveying it, but also testing it out, right? Like if I tell a story and you're like, no, that's not going to work. And you're like, take a couple turns and get it. So the storytelling is really huge into that. Thank you everybody for jumping in on the Slido. So I'm going to take these from the top. For someone coming from a CS training background, what would you say are the most transferable skills, and what skills do people from CS typically lack? CS being customer service or computer
science.
I thought computer science too.
The customer success. Yeah, training, CS training. Yeah.
It's an optional question. You can take it from the computer science or customer service angles.
Both perspectives. Yeah, I want to see the areas, yes, computer science background.
I'll try to do CS because we hired. I mean, when I was at Points too, we hired a few folks from CS. I hope they're doing well in product, I think the most transferable skill ever is empathy with the customer and their problem, and nobody empathizes with an organization's customers as people that have to deal with all the crap that comes through Zendesk and whatnot. So
it's a safe space. You can upload here.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I would say that empathy for a customer's problem would go a long way in product management in terms of trying to go from what is that problem to a solution. So I tell a lot of folks who are trying to get into product, if you can get into a support role at an organization that you really love, go and do that for a while and then move over into product, because it's worked in the past. Like we're able to find some really good gem product managers in that department.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the empathy is key for the end user and all their pain points, but also if your company, like in our case, we also build internal tools, you'll know the things you can't do either. And so if they're coming from that CS kind of role, they're gonna know all the pain points, not just from, the end user, but themselves in terms of trying to figure out how to solve that problem for them, remediate that problem. So they're a wealth of knowledge from that perspective. And so they'll be able to describe the problem and the pain or how long it takes them to do something, like all the analysis of it deeply because they felt it on a daily basis. And so they can work with, and I think what they'll have to learn that they won't is how to prioritize it based on everything else. Like how is, what was the most painful thing for them, or the thing that they heard the most, phone calls about, how does that stack up to something else, and using, I would say the data points to help them make the best prioritization calls.
Yeah, I just to add on to that, I think and one other way that I would articulate that benefit of coming from that background is the ability to naturally focus on value, the value for the end user. Good ideas and cool ideas can be a dime a dozen. You're like, oh, we should build this, and it'll do that, and that. And, right. So, but what's that going to do for the end user? Like, why is that going to make their life easier? Why is that going to make them happier? And they spend all day figuring out what doesn't make these people happy and what does make them happy. So the ability to translate all the ideas into what's the value of this and will it be valuable? I think is exactly what it is. I think maybe the gap they asked, like, what would be the gap is maybe the complexity of sort of the impact analysis of when you launch something. Like sometimes it takes a lot of getting used to. If I implement this feature, here's the 61 ripple effects that's going to have on the other 40 parts of the product and the 20 parts of the organization. It's not something they've had to think about on a daily basis. So that's something that you kind of have to, I think, ramp up on and just comes with time, sort of realize what.
Jane, the way you answered the question, 100% tells the story of how I got into product from the client services organization, leading enterprise engagements, being like, these things are broken, my customers are upset. Why isn't product prioritizing my customers' problems? And I was like, I know how to fix this problem. And then fought tooth and nail to become a product manager to try to solve them, but then struggled to prioritize all the things that my partners were bringing to me, saying, our customers need this. And I was like, how do I juggle it all? So next question, how can a mid-career pro professional in their 30s figure out if product management is a good fit, and how best to get in with, in this one, we're going to say computer science or business background. Do you need an MBA? Do you need a master's in CS?
I had to say no because I don't have an MBA. I know that you had to like make the call out there, but I don't think it's a requirement. And I think, we've hired some great folks from, at points from different, parts of points that they don't come from tech background and they're very different in how they solve a problem. But because they want to be successful and they've taken upon themselves to at least learn the basics so that they can empathize with the engineering team, they can talk and understand some stuff. They're not going to code, but they can relate. And so I think having that level of empathy, that it's hard, it's tough, it's not something you just learn overnight, but it's not something you have to study deeply either. And I think, you started the question from an age perspective. I think at some point you just have to take that leap of faith if you really want it, and if that's the thing that makes you excited and happy and you want to be the person who gets to help decide what problems they're fixing. You just gotta trust it and surround yourself like, these kind of events where you meet people, and how do you take that leap of faith? You don't have to do it by yourself. There are lots of folks who've done it as well, who are willing to kind of have the coffee chat with you or have, mentoring sessions with you to try and help you ease it a bit more so it's not so scary.
Nothing against MBAs. No, I sort of just imagine reading a resume or listening to someone's experience and then being like, just me looking and be like, nothing related to product, nothing related to product, nothing related to product. MBA, he's in. Like, never gonna happen.
Or she.
Yeah, so it's never gonna happen. So I think it's really about what we talked about. It's characteristics, and it's about your passion. And it's about the nature of your personality, how you ask questions, how you investigate things. So yeah, I don't think it's, I think it is taking that leap of faith. And I think it's engaging in a way with your roles such that you show those characteristics of what it would be to be a good PM, which is why I tend to try and lean on some sort of hard criteria that maybe you can tie to, like, oh yeah, I was able to show communication skills when I did this, and I was able to show this when I did that. Getting a credential will help if it's, let's say, very specific to product management. Would be nice to know that the passion is there and you're willing to put extra effort into building that knowledge. But it really is about exposing those characteristics that we talked about.
So 100% you do not need an MBA. The only valuable thing that I got out of my MBA was one, time management, because I did it part-time while I was working. And I was very lucky that I had a supportive partner at home that helped me through this while we had a small baby at home. That I don't recommend. The only thing that I got out of it beyond that was the fact that I did it at Rodman here in Toronto, and they have a very strong design thinking program. And the design thinking program really was what brought me into product management, because you're forced to think about putting the customer at the center of every decision that you make, because that's what designers do, because otherwise they wouldn't be successful. And the other point that I would make, and I see Heidi here, one of the things that she was instrumental in me getting my role here at Coconut, and one of the things that she helped me articulate in my pitch to Coconut was really taking all the different crap that I did in my 10+ year career and focusing on, like, what are the outcomes? What is it that you can point to and say, I was able to deliver this? That's what matters. It goes back to outcomes. So thank you for that. And that is advice that I give all of you, is focus on not what you did, but what are the outcomes, because we spent a lot of our time on stuff that is meaningless. It doesn't contribute to any kind of value.
So I'm very excited about the questions that have come through. There's a lot more questions than we have time for. I'm going to post all of these questions to our Slack channel after the meeting, and would love anybody to come in and to participate on the questions and offer their perspective. Would love to have you all join us there if you want to do any more pontificating in there, no bloviating. So love that. And so as we're kind of wrapping up the panel, thinking back to that open question about, where you were before you came into product management, is product management what you imagined it was going to be from the outside?
Yes, only because I worked with someone like Mihnea and other like really talented product folks where I saw the chaos. And so I was like, I knew what I was signing up for when I got in there, that I was like, it's going to be chaotic in a good way. It's going to be exciting in a good way. I'm going to be able to, ask questions and be curious and be more of who I am, I would say. Because I am organized, but I kind of live with a little bit of chaos is comfortable. But I love being able to ask questions and wanting to try to be the person that helps to solve that problem. So
I'm a big yes and a big no. It's right down the middle. Yes, in that the idea of being a product manager, it sort of sounds like, oh, you'll do everything. And you do, like that, you actually will have to do everything. So you have to be in every single element of every single decision and talk to every single person in the organization. I don't know if there's a role that talks to more people in an organization. So that was expected, and that's super cool. That's what makes it, I think, one of the most fun jobs, is that you get to touch everything. What I did anticipate is, we talked about before, which is how different the role is and the departments are from company to company, and what problem you may have to solve each place you go. That I didn't see coming, in terms of like where you're going to contribute day to day, whether it's structural leadership, solutioning, sales support, whatever it might be. The variety of things you may do, the two days in a row that are the same, that I didn't see coming. That still continues to shock me, but it's a little bit of both.
I don't think that I kind of fell into this. So I didn't really have any expectations, and I think the role changed time, with companies, with seniority. The role changes with the people that you work with. Like it's better at times, it's better some days, it's better in some teams, it's not as good in other teams. So I think it's just that ability, as Jane mentioned, to be adaptable and flexible and not be stuck in any one way. I think is the thing that has helped me navigate this for better or worse. I don't know. For right now, I would say this is my home, but I don't know. Who knows tomorrow? Where this goes. So.
Brilliant. Really nice reflections to end the conversation on. Can we get a huge round of applause for? So a quick note, we're working on our programming for the rest of the winter and the spring. We're talking about AI in product making. So this is not making AI products. This is using artificial intelligence in the process of creating products. In March, we're going to get together building products with diverse perspectives. And then in April, we're going to touch on products that have something particularly seasonal about them. Think education and the start of school, and you can't give something to teachers right in the middle of the term. There's no cognitive space to deal with that. And so like, what are those nuances when you're dealing with one sector or another, and the idiosyncrasies of making products for those. So that's the program for tonight. One more huge round of applause for our panel. And thank you to Verset for having us in your beautiful new space. Very much look forward to, they've offered to host all the events through the remainder of this season through June. So we will be in this same space for the next several months. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to our folks that are online. Thank you all so much.